It started with a smell. At first, it was just gas, maybe something mechanical. Then it shifted something sharp, something sour. The kind of smell that hits your stomach before it hits your brain. And by the time officers realized what it was already too late. On May 22, 2019, police in Sturgis, Michigan responded to an anonymous 911 call. The voice on the other end told them to go to a specific apartment, that they find the missing 42-year-old woman named Kelly Jean Warner Miller inside. To the officers, it felt strange. No one had reported her missing. There hadn't been any public searches or alerts. But when they knocked on that door, just before midnight, they had no idea they were about to walk into one of the most gruesome discoveries of their careers. Inside that small apartment, a quiet man named Wade Allen answered the door. He looked sleepy, confused, and harmless. He said he hadn't seen Kelly in months, but something didn't feel right, and one specific cooler in the corner of the room would soon reveal the horrifying truth. What really happened to Kelly Jean was darker than anyone imagined. Kelly Jean Warner Miller, or KJ, as her friends called her, was 42 years old when she vanished. She'd struggled with mental health issues for years and didn't have a stable home. KJ had spent time at shelters in Michigan, including in Kalamazoo, and often drifted from place to place. The kind of life made her disappearances hard to track. People assumed she was just off the grid again, but those who knew her still cared. She wasn't invisible, just overlooked. One of the people she crossed paths with was Wade Allen. He was 35 at the time, and like KJ, he'd also spent time in shelters. Wade had recently found a place to live after being homeless, and while he didn't have much, he kept to himself and seemed quiet. On the surface, he didn't seem dangerous, maybe just awkward. People in his shelter system knew him as a loner. Some said he was kind. Others said he had a temper. Wade and KJ met through one of the shelters. They weren't close, but they had a connection. She stayed at his apartment a few times. Wade claimed he looked out for her, that she needed help. But as police would later learn, the truth wasn't nearly that simple. Whatever bond they had had twisted into something toxic, something controlling. And behind closed doors, KJ's final days became a nightmare no one could have imagined. No one knows the exact day Kelly Jean died. What we do know is this. At some point in the spring of 2019, she went to stay at Wade Allen's apartment and never walked out again. Wade would later tell police that KJ had been unwell, that she had trouble walking, trouble controlling her bladder, and that he was just trying to care for her. He claimed she needed adult foster care, not police intervention. But his version of events quickly started to unravel. In reality, KJ was trapped. According to statements from Wade's own cellmates, he began tying her up to keep her from leaving. He used ropes, bungee cords, even a makeshift gag, a rag tie like a horse bit, so she couldn't scream. He said she was fighting back, saying she wanted to call the police. That's when Wade doubled down. The abuse got worse. He withheld food. He covered her mouth. He made sure she couldn't move, couldn't speak. And slowly, day by day, her condition worsened. At some point, she stopped talking altogether. Wade told his cellmates that she wouldn't die, like it was an inconvenience to him. And eventually, she just stopped breathing. But the horror didn't stop there. Wade kept her body in his apartment for days, then weeks. He put her in a plastic cooler. Where she wouldn't fit, he used a saw. Her arms, her legs, her torso. It was gruesome, unimaginable. And all the while, he kept her there, saying he still talked to her and wanted to visit her. What he did in those weeks after her death is unspeakable, but would all come out in time. Everything started unraveling with a single 911 call. The caller didn't leave their name, but they gave police a direct address. They said if officers went to that apartment, they'd find Kelly Jean Warner Miller. And they were right. When police arrived just before midnight, Wade Allen answered the door. He looked tired and confused. He said he hadn't seen KJ in months, that she might be in Kalamazoo. But the officers weren't convinced. His answers were vague. He didn't want them inside. And when they asked about a large cooler in the apartment, Wade suddenly clammed up. Eventually, he agreed to let one officer in, someone he recognized from before. They looked around. The place was cluttered, but nothing seemed obviously wrong until they reached that cooler. That's when Wade started stalling. He said it was for parties. Said it wasn't the right time to open it. He got nervous, defensive. That was enough. Police detained him outside and secured a warrant. While Wade sat squirming in the back of a squad car, officers went back in. What they found they'll never forget. Inside the cooler were human remains. Arms, legs, torso, all dismembered. The stench was overwhelming. KJ had been dead for weeks. And it wasn't just the condition of the body. It was the clear, intentional way she'd been cut apart. Later searches found even more disturbing items. Rope, belts, women's shoes. It painted a terrifying picture. This wasn't an accident. This was a slow, methodical act of cruelty. And it was only the beginning of what investigators were about to uncover. Once Wade Allen was taken into custody, police began digging deeper. Not just into the apartment, but into his past, his behavior, and the truth he was still trying to hide. At first, Wade claimed KJ's death was natural, but he didn't know what to do. But he panicked. He said he only kept her body because he wanted to give her a proper burial. But that didn't explain the dismemberment. It didn't explain the cooler. And it definitely didn't explain the disturbing things that came out during jailhouse interviews. Several inmates came forward voluntarily. They said Wade had bragged about what he did. He told them how he tied KJ up, how she fought back, how he made her go quiet. One inmate said Wade even told him he had sex with KJ's body after she died, that he warmed her up first. Another said Wade called himself Chops and wanted to write a book about the whole thing. It was sick, and it destroyed any chance Wade had of defending his actions. In 2023, Wade Allen was convicted of second-degree murder and mutilation of a dead body. He pleaded no contest, essentially admitting guilt without going for a full trial. The court sentenced him to 39 to 60 years in prison. But that wasn't the end. A year after his arrest, Wade assaulted another inmate, a man he believed had spoken to police. He was convicted of third-degree criminal conduct for that, too. Even behind bars, Wade remained violent, manipulative, and dangerous. For the officers who stepped into that apartment, the trauma didn't end when the case closed. Many of them said it was the most disturbing scene they'd ever encountered. Some said they'd never forget the smell. Others said they'd never forget the look on Wade's face when he casually offered to eat a cookie, knowing full well what they were about to find. For Kelly Jean's family, the pain ran even deeper. They hadn't spoken to her in a long time, but they still loved her. She was someone's daughter, someone's friend. And even if she had drifted out of touch, they never imagined this was how her story would end. The thought of her suffering alone, at the hands of someone she once trusted, was almost too much to bear. The community of Sturgis, Michigan, was shaken. This wasn't the kind of town where things like this were supposed to happen. People asked how something so horrific could go unnoticed. How a woman could be missing for weeks without anyone realizing. And how a man like Wade, quiet, polite, seemingly harmless, could carry out such monstrous acts. In the end, the case forced a difficult conversation about how society treats people who live on the margins, about how women like KJ, homeless, mentally unwell, forgotten, are often the easiest targets, and how abusers can hide in plain sight when no one's really looking. What happened to Kelly Jean Warner Miller wasn't just a tragedy, it was a failure of the system, a failure of community, and a failure of the people around her to truly see her. She didn't die in a storm or a fire or some random accident. She died slowly, painfully, and alone, locked away in a room with someone who claimed to care. And Wade Allen? He wasn't a monster in the way movies show us. He didn't jump out of the shadows or wear a mask. He was quiet, polite, soft-spoken. But underneath all of that was cruelty, real cruelty, the kind that builds slowly and hides behind excuses. This case reminds us that evil doesn't always look like we expect it to, that the most dangerous people are sometimes the ones no one noticed.